Della,
Yes.
will you give me a can of a beverage? Do you want something, Eric?
Yes.
Would you like a beverage in your can?
Well, now that you mention it,
What do you guys think about the fancy new sign that my daughter made me?
yeah, with the black background,
It looks a lot better, doesn't it?
It's visible.
It is.
Visible's better.
Visible, that means able to see. That's something we strive for, since this is a video show. Oh, thank you, my dear. Everybody, welcome. This is Common Ground. We're just getting started. I see a few of you have joined us. Please type in and say hello. I'm using this new, I still haven't figured out how to use this thing. I'm John, your host. This is Eric, who is a safe distance away from me and behind me. We're social distancing safely, I'll have you know. And we are going to kick off here in just a moment. We'll find out if I can remember that intro. The real story tonight, two things. Hi, Denise. The real story tonight, Denise, I'm glad you're there. Ken will enjoy this. The real story is that the weeds are gone. My daughter heard you guys making fun of me last week, and she got rid of them. Can you believe that? I didn't do it. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is Common Ground. We're going to kick it off here in just a moment.
This should not be hard, but please find another reason to make fun of him.
Well, it ain't going to be that beautiful sign that my daughter made for us. Carol, I'm really glad you're here. Welcome. Glad you are here tonight. We're going to need help from you with what we're going to discuss tonight. All right, guys, we're going to kick it off. Well, welcome, everybody. I'm your host, John Lombardo. You are on Common Ground. Common Ground is a show that seeks to reduce the amount of fear and dissension that's among the people out there watching by using that old-fashioned, tried-and-true method of intelligent discussion. So this is a forum for people to discuss uncomfortable and difficult topics using the lost art of civil discourse and respectful disagreement. And when we can do things in that way, we find that we usually end up on common ground. I'm your host, John Lombardo. This is my co-host, Eric Rodriguez.
Hi, folks.
Probably not even a real captain. And hey, America, it's an election year. Can you guess how many candidates that are still have a viable chance of becoming the president of the United States have not been accused of multiple sexual assaults against women?
I know.
How many?
Zero.
Does that number surprise you, kids? Oh, boy. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm
already exhausted.
This is one of those times when I hate being right. But I've been saying for many weeks that
that's not true, you guys. He does not hate being right.
No, I do. I do hate being right now. I've been saying for weeks that I thought that Joe Biden was not a good candidate. When there were 20 Democrats on the stage, I said he came in 20th place for me in terms of what I thought. And now new
shit has
come to light. That's right. So this week in a fairly tremendous bombshell, there has been a very serious sexual assault allegation leveled against the Democratic presidential nominee. Tonight, we want to discuss that. And Allison, I'm glad we could help. Allison Prestridge said, I thought today was Saturday until this popped into my notification. So now we're like a calendar for these people. That's
like
great.
Clockwork, these two guys.
That's great, Allison. We're glad we could help. And once again, this is Common Ground. We're here coming to you from my backyard, social distancing safe, Eric and myself. Hopefully soon we can get back into our fact cave.
You know, I got to say, when we started this show, it was hot AF in the
yes,
the cave.
It was. That's right.
It might be better here. It had just gotten pleasant. We'd also had a little cold spell, and then it was like, oh, it's perfect in here. And we were just really enjoying it, and then boom.
Now we're done. So we're going to talk about this issue tonight. As you may have seen if you logged in, you saw that our topic tonight was the Democrats and Joe Biden. What the hell are the Democrats going to do now? We're going to talk about this issue, but we really want to hear from you. We want to hear what your perspectives on this are. Typically, we get a fairly decent mix of people who are both conservative and liberal on this show, and that's what we want. We want both opinions respected and represented. But I'm going to kick it off by saying this is such a tough thing to have happen because this is such a hot button topic for the liberal and progressive movement to have this man who has just gotten he's just gotten the nomination. There really isn't a clear, there's no other option really right now at this point. And this is something that really bothers me too. Our political system's so jacked up that we're in April and we're stuck with this decision until November, right? And we have half the year we are stuck with this candidate. So I think it's disturbing. Look, we're also going to talk about the allegations. There are some questionable elements to the story, but much as I don't want to admit it, I think that he's probably guilty to some extent. I do think that. Doesn't mean I'm right. It's an opinion. I want to hear what you guys think. So please feel free to chime in and let us know what you think. And more importantly, what do you think the Democratic Party should do from this point going forward? Why, Eric, and of course, anytime I ask a question to Eric or he asks a question to me, you're all included. We want to hear what you guys think about this as well. How is it
more important for you guys to
probably
chime
more
in?
important, yeah. How is it in this day and age that with all the social progressions we've seen, all the diversification of it's just the stuff that's happened in the United States of America in recent years, how do we have two old white sexual assaulters as our only options for president of the United States? How did we get there? I mean, it's a challenge.
Obviously, that's a rhetorical question. There is no real answer for that. However, I'll bring up a couple.
Maybe there is.
I'll bring up a couple of things.
Okay.
I mean, I think that I do think that power corrupts. I think that's a factor.
Okay.
I think that the more privilege you have, the more likely you are to abuse the privilege that you have. Not saying that people with privilege always abuse. I'm just saying the more likely. When you're white and male and straight and rich and powerful, there's a lot of temptation to. I mean, temptation is not the right word. I just think that power corrupts, and entitlement also corrupts. That people.
And in our society, that's who has most of the power.
Correct.
And has for quite a while.
Yeah.
It's not like a racial flaw in all white people, but in our society.
Yeah,
that's who has held the power for a long time. So they're the people most susceptible to the corruption you're speaking to. Right. Okay.
And age and being raised in a different time could have have something to do with it. But I think power corrupting and entitlement corrupting, I think, are probably the biggest answers to your question.
So Carol said our choices are a guy who's been accused of groping, not all that credibly, a woman years ago, and a guy who brags on tape about groping women not that long ago. Kennedy, Clinton, Kavanaugh, and so many others couldn't keep their hands off women. As I said during the Clinton issue, people don't become politicians because they don't want, is it boob jobs? Oh. Well, you know what, Carol? It's a good point. I mean, look, there is a difference between a charismatic, a person with sex appeal and charisma, and a person who thinks they can impose themselves on women sexually. But I remember a great, well, I don't know if it was great, but a bit that Colin, what was the guy's name? He used to do the news on Saturday Night Live. Colin, I'm not going to remember his name, but he was talking about Bill Clinton during the impeachment trial. And Clinton, this was before all we knew at that time was that he'd had an affair with a young girl. And he said, I got news for you people. The same qualities that get you elected, get you laid. And there is a type of charisma that often gets people elected to positions of power. And that power, yes, it corrupts the people who hold it. It is also alluring to the people who observe in those people. And so maybe there is some type of seduction inherent in that. However, I think we're going a step further when you say, Colin Quinn, thank you, Shane. Right on, brother. Thanks, man. Right on.
Yeah. There's a big difference between, yes, it's absolutely true that regardless of whether, I mean, there's a celebrity factor in rock stars and politicians and, movie stars and yada, yada, yada that attracts a lot of people. There's a very big difference between people being attracted to somebody and putting themselves, close to somebody and somebody crossing a line of consent. There's a different, those are very different things.
I totally agree with you. And one of the things that Eric and I had a lot of discussions about this week. We wanted to discuss this topic. We wanted to cover a lot of areas on it. We also felt it was very, very important that we not be the only perspectives. We are both male. I have never really felt afraid that I was going to get sexually assaulted in my life by a woman. I've had women do things, especially when I was working in live show settings, that I thought was an invasion of my privacy, but I never felt afraid. And so I think that it's important that we have some perspectives from some of our female viewers like Denise, Carol, Allison, all you folks that are out there. So we really want to hear from you ladies today about this because your perspective is the most important one. Dave said, let's go over the options. 1, go with Biden. 2, don't run a candidate. Is there a third option? There is not, Dave, and that was something I was complaining about just a moment ago.
I mean, there are options. However, it's very unlikely that there would be a change of any kind. The DNC is, they're pretty locked into this candidate who, by the way, before this was sitting back and letting Donald Trump have his daily briefings, and Trump's ratings were going down and Biden's ratings were going up before this announcement. So, I mean, the DNC had a real good feeling about the way things were going without even starting the campaign in any kind of earnestness.
Right. He was cranking it up. That's
right. But you point out a fundamental flaw of, I mean, and we've talked about this many, many, many times. We need 5 good parties, so that there can be some nuance to people's messages, and it's not I'm either on this side or I'm on that side. And this kind of thing, if you had 2 more parties that were
viable and
that were kind of aligned with a lot of the stuff that you're aligned with instead of one, well, you just go, I'm not voting for that dude.
And particularly in this is just stunning to me. And it points out such a fundamental flaw in the system. This is, like I said, it's April. This has all come out. And now between now and November.
And the interesting thing about what you're saying is their campaigns are freaking out that campaigning can't get started.
Right. Yeah. Dave said, do the masses really care about sexual predators as our leaders? They've continually elected them knowing this was the case. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's true. I don't think that people knew about the predatory proclivities of people like Bill Clinton and John F. Kennedy before they were elected. Certainly.
And to be fair, I believe that because things have been so, I mean, maybe you don't vet very well when the president had 24 accusations and it doesn't seem to, and then you have this very, very public confirmation with Kavanaugh that people just not only said like, they got angry about the fact that he was asked to explain himself.
Yeah.
So in that environment, maybe the DNC decided like it doesn't really matter. But it seems pretty clear that even if they tried to vet this, that this information wasn't really readily available. That they're, I don't know, I just know what I read. What I read was that that is it Tara Reid?
Yeah.
So that she told 2 people a long time ago, and there wasn't any official.
Well, let's get into that timeline. there's going to be a lot to talk about that'll come out of discussing the elements of this. So,
well, just let me make this point,
Yeah.
because I don't want that, what I just said, to be misconstrued. All I was saying was, it doesn't appear that if the DNC was trying to do vetting, that there was much to dig up around this.
so yeah, and
Like unlike
Right.
if you were Donald Trump, those accusations
All over the
existed
place,
all
right.
over the place in the news, and all that kind of stuff.
well, that's one of the things that the people that are going to defend Joe Biden are going to bring up. It's quite interesting, actually, and definitely all of the outrage around Kavanaugh's election and nomination to the Supreme Court and the ensuing hubbub around that with Dr. I'm sorry, what was her name? Excuse me? Dr. Ford, right. Who seemed very credible to me when she testified. That was a huge outrage. There was such a media explosion around that. And like you said, his defenders seemed to be outraged that the question would even be put forth to him. So I'm hoping that Democrats will handle it differently and at least say, we're going to let this process occur of let's look into it, right? Investigate it. I certainly hope that.
Well, so far that's all I've read.
And I'll tell you something. It's interesting. So right now, all the right-wing outlets, stuff like Fox News and places like that, are just screaming. And it's funny. They're not screaming about Joe Biden as a creep. What they're screaming is the left-wing media is hypocritical because they're not reporting on this story. And the fact is, they are right. I mean, I've been watching the story. There is very little coverage of it so I saw something in New York Times. New York Times ran the story.
What is, I wonder what they consider this is,
well, let me tell you who ran it.
That's hard. Well, I mean, I Googled it.
Mm-hmm.
I saw article after article after article. I saw 10 articles from 10 different media outlets.
But listen to this.
I mean, they're probably all the same article, but they were 10 different sources.
Sure. But the New York Times ran it. USA Today ran something interesting on it we're going to get into. Politico ran it. The Hill. CNN, who is, the considered to be the Democratic shill network.
For
right?
sure. I don't.
They only ran a statement on what Stacey Abrams' comments were about it. They did not run the story, at least until yesterday. MSNBC and Huffington Post, nothing.
CNN lost me in 2016 the way that they shilled for Hillary and more importantly than that, because whatever I mean, people have a bias when they tell stories, but the thing that was really obvious to me is they were stirring up Red Scare tactics. They sounded to me just like the right wing around Bernie Sanders. I mean, I thought it was actually disgusting the way how obvious it was. And I haven't taken anything seriously since then.
Well, they are a major news network.
Yeah.
They didn't run it. MSNBC didn't run it. Huffington Post didn't run it. And my point is, I do believe that these are stations that are guilty of being propaganda channels for Democrats, just like Fox News is a total Trump propaganda channel. So now the interesting thing about this, though, once again, those other channels that I just mentioned, Breitbart, Fox, they're not attacking Biden, because how can they? Because they've completely defended a man whose record is far worse than Biden's at this point. So they can't do that.
I hope that's true, because there are many, many things where I say, how could they possibly do this? And they do it anyway.
They're not doing it yet. They're not doing it yet. They are attacking the media. And in that attack, I believe they are accurate. So if you haven't been able to hear the story, let me give you the facts of the case right now. I know some people watch this story with their children. Watch the show with their children. So I'm going to keep it. I'm not going to get too graphic on a couple of these very unpleasant details. Okay. So, what happened is that a woman named Tara Reid, who used to work for Biden, says that in 1993, he confronted her, pushed her up against the wall, and put his hand up his skirt and did a couple other things. And then she has a neighbor who corroborates that 2 years later, she confided this in her. And allegedly, there is a phone call into Larry King's show that year about a woman talking about her daughter having some problems with a political official. Tara Reid's mother is dead. She's passed away. Tara Reid says that was her mother. There's no real corroboration that was her mother. She didn't identify herself. So that's not a provable point to the story. So that's where we are with the story. And before I go any further into some of these details, I want to find out what the folks out there that are watching, we probably got some comments. So let's see here. Carol said, how do we in retrospect know whether what happened between two people years ago was predation, a dalliance gone wrong, or a well-timed effort to gain attention? The stories are so girl fiction in their language that even I, who prosecuted rapists and molesters, have a hard time knowing. Carol, that's interesting. I did not know that you have that in your background. I'd love to hear your background. Many on Facebook have been comparing the left's response to Kavanaugh versus Biden, calling us hypocrites for being crickets. I believe there are several reasons for this, and I don't believe hypocrisy is part of it. Denise, I'd love to hear what you think the reasons are. I do believe that there are crickets, so I'd like to hear your comment. I think your opening comments were a bit limiting. This is not a politics in America. This is true in all societies, and not just in politics. It's the same in entertainment, business, etc. As far as a conservative perspective on this, I would suggest the same things that I would have wanted for Justice Kavanaugh. First, assume innocence until proven guilty, then follow the due process of the law. Right on, Pete. Completely agree with you. So Denise is starting to bring up a couple of things. I think we should cover these facts. So here's some of the facts of the story. It's interesting that you said what you said, Carol, because one of the most impactful things I was able to find this week in the news was an article in USA Today written by a man who has 28 years experience as a federal prosecutor. He said, I prosecuted a lot of assault cases. The vast majority came in early in my career, and I was a young attorney at a prosecutor's office outside Detroit. He said, a year ago, Tara Reade accused Vice President Joe Biden of touching her shoulder and neck in a way that made her uncomfortable when she worked for him as a staff assistant in '93. Then last month, Reade told an interviewer that Biden had stuck his hand under her skirt and forcibly, done some things with his fingers. Right? Biden denies the allegation. He said, when women make allegations of sexual assault, my default response is to believe them. But as the news media have investigated Reade's allegation, I've become increasingly skeptical as a prosecutor. Here are some reasons why. So let's talk about some of these. The delayed reporting. So she waited, and he says twice. She not only waited 27 years to publicly report her allegations, but she also had a chance to report that this had happened a year ago. And all she said was, he touched my shoulder and made me feel uncomfortable.
So let me address that a little bit from personal experience and from academic study.
Mm-hmm.
So when people have traumatic events occur,
mm-hmm.
oftentimes, especially those of a sexual nature, oftentimes people are ashamed to admit the truth.
Right, of course.
And it can take years and years for people to talk about something that had happened. And when they begin to talk about it, sometimes it doesn't all come out. They dip their toe in to test the waters to see how safe it is to be able to tell their story. So I in my opinion, the length of time that it's been, the milder story to start fits the description of somebody who had something traumatic happen to them. As I said, from personal experience, I had something happen when I was a teenager that it took me years to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It took me, you were my best friend at the time. You were present in there. It took me years to tell you because I was ashamed of myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's from my personal experience. I also know, I've taken classes. I have, for those folks out there that don't know, I have a master's degree in psychology, and I interned as a marriage and family therapist before becoming a school counselor. And just so people know that I have a little bit of background with working with people with trauma. And this is a predictable pattern for many, many people. Not all people have bad things happen, become traumatized in the way that they, shut down, but many people do. And it can take long periods of time to be to work through that shame, or just, or like whatever the process is to heal enough to be able to then have the ego strength to be able to then talk about it.
Yeah. And now how this will be spun by people defending Biden, whether it's true or not, will be that you didn't come out with this specific story until Biden won the nomination. And there's some strange things in the orbit of Tara Reade. I don't know. I'm not suggesting they make her less credible, but she wrote these bizarre op-eds. I read them. These editorials about Putin and praising Putin. Did you read those? About his sexual.
I didn't.
About how he is just sexual chocolate to women and things like that. Then she became sort of. She's actually. Hi, Sarah. Glad you're here. She actually has said some very flattering things on public and social media pages about Biden in the years since then, but became very, very supportive of Bernie Sanders in the last year. Once again, this is all traceable to her social media pages, and like I said, those strange editorials that I read them, and then this story comes out like 2 days after Bernie gave up, basically. So people will definitely she will be challenged by, look, the timing of this is a little too perfect. That all of a sudden, when you waited until Joe Biden became the what's it called? The candidate, right?
Yeah. The nominee.
The nominee. Then you came forward with this version of your story. So that's gonna work. That's going to be challenging for her. And it's not. Look, that's another thing. It's not easy to come out with something like this. I imagine it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. There's a lot of shame. You're going to be scrutinized, especially in a case like this. She's going to be scrutinized in ways that are savage. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So she will be criticized for that. Another element to this story is,
which, by the way, in case anyone is thinking about criticizing her, please try not to.
Yeah.
Criticize, the facts, criticize the decisions if that's what you choose to do with your opinion, but leave the human being alone as much as possible.
We're talking about the sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden, about the process, talking about the alleged victim, Tara Reade. We're talking about what Democrats might do about this as we move into this election year. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from our ladies out there. Please share your perspectives with us. Pete said, are you suggesting this is possibly a move being made by a Sanders supporter to derail the Biden nomination? Well, Pete, I am not personally suggesting that I believe that, but that is definitely going to be something she will be accused of because of the things she was saying about Bernie Sanders in that time leading up to him, losing the nomination, essentially. So I'm just saying that narrative will be out there. Denise said, I get where you're coming from. There has not been much outcry. And so this is a long one. Okay, so let me, this is going to take me some time to read. And we say, believe all survivors, but it's also true there are victims who are falsely reported, or victims who falsely reported. It's a low percentage. I think about 4 to 6%, same as with other crimes, but it does happen. Look at Jussie Smollett. It is my opinion that the women's groups are a bit of a dilemma. On the one hand, they have the current POTUS, who no matter what they said or did was not ever officially investigated for his alleged crimes. Yes, journalists have investigated where they could, most who believe there is substance to the allegations, but only one victim has been willing to subject herself to the horrors of the courts against a wealthy man with the best money can buy. And that case has been languishing for several years. On the other hand, is the man poised to run against him, and the allegation of his one accuser has been investigated by journalists, all or almost all the journalists who work for publications with mixed, mostly below factual ratings are not included here, who have deemed it to be unbelievable. I think it sucks that the choice this November is between the incumbent with 22 allegations against him that have never been officially investigated and the candidate with one allegation that hasn't been investigated, but there it is. I agree with you. Thank you. Couldn't agree with you more. So we got some ladies that are speaking here. I want to get their opinions out here. Carol, the thing that made me most concerned was not the time in reporting I agree with Eric. This is really common, and the reports can vary from time to time. For me, it was the melodramatic words she put into his mouth, which come from a kind of romance novel, bad boy villain hero. Men don't say things like that. I cannot say nothing happened, only that the descriptions are not credible. That's from Carol, and once again, she has a background in criminal prosecution, sexual crimes. Is that right, Carol? Marcia, glad you're here. Marcia said
major crimes.
On the other side of the fence, I know a man that was loosely accused of sexual assault, and when pressed, she admitted she was lying. The guy was a friend of mine, and the dates the girl gave didn't match, so I was able to question it. I'm not saying this is the case with Biden, but I saw what an untrue allegation can do to someone. Dave said, as it stands right now, we will have an accused sexual predator sitting in the White House after this next election. For those of us who aren't planning on for a third candidate, what else goes into that decision? Very good, Dave. Good point. Billy, hi, Billy. Glad you're here. He said, this reminds you of the Kavanaugh hearings, but from the other side. How will it spin? Is there common ground here? I hope there is. Marcia, thank you for saying what you said. And I want to tell you, you might remember this. We were youngsters. When I was about 19 years old, I was a victim of a person who accused me of raping her. Do you remember this? Now, this person came out and said that I had done this to her. And it was horrifying. And some people believed it. It was a terrible thing to go through. Luckily for me, one of my friends was in the room with me when it happened. What she said happened. And he was able to say, what the hell are you talking about? I was there. Nothing happened. I don't know if she didn't know or what, but I actually went to her family and said, you'd better tell her to call the police or I'm going to. And then she completely said, I'm sorry, that didn't happen. And It's a horrible, horrible position to be put in. So I've been on that side of it too, Marcia. So thanks for sharing that story. Anyway, Billy asked a good question. Is there common ground here? Billy, let me tell you my answer to that question. My common ground falls along the lines of what Pete said. Let's follow our laws. Innocent until proven guilty, and investigate. That's what we need to do, right?
Yeah.
That's what I say. I agree with Pete on that one.
Yeah, I do too. And really it really is the only stand that I would want to take. Let's investigate.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, if you want to talk politics about Joe Biden, I'm down for talking politics about Joe Biden. If you want to talk about trauma, I'll talk about that. But I don't have any interest in trying to dissect her comments or her allegations, or I'm aware that Joe Biden has said that the accusation is false, and I'm aware that a bunch of Democratic politicians have said, yeah, let's have an investigation.
Have they?
Yeah.
I know that in one of the articles I read, a spokesperson for Biden said, let's investigate this like we would any crime. That's comforting to hear. One of the things I really, I didn't know who Brett Kavanaugh was until he was nominated to the Supreme Court. And as I told you guys, I watched Dr. Ford testify, and she seemed like a credible witness to me. The things that, here's what I noticed about Kavanaugh. First of all, I thought it was outrageous how his defenders behaved, as if the very suggestion that he should be questioned was all a ploy. They never once gave any credence to this woman. Like, let's at least assume that maybe she's telling the truth and behave with some decorum of respect toward her, right? And then secondly, but then I will also say that in the Kavanaugh situation, I don't think most men who truly assault women only assault one woman. I think you would find a pattern, and they didn't find that in Kavanaugh's behavior. I thought that was telling. Who knows? My personal feeling was there was enough credibility in Dr. Ford's story that I don't know if I felt comfortable with him being appointed to the Supreme Court, but that's the way it panned out.
I had doubts about that, but for me, worse than that, his behavior showed me that to me, I don't trust him to be a judge. His lack of equanimity was shocking to me. I don't think he has what it takes to be a judge. I don't trust him to advocate fairly with that kind of,
that temperament.
That temperament. I mean, it was astonishing to me how out of control he was. And there was enough suspicion to at least, but
okay.
I don't get to make those decisions.
Guys, I want to, like I said tonight, I really want to take great pains to give the platform to our female viewers whenever I can on this topic. And Sarah has said something. I want to read it. And Sarah, I've known you since high school. I love you. I just am so proud of you for sharing this with us. She said, this is such a tough subject, really. As a 16-year-old, I was raped. And honestly, I've never voiced this publicly until now. Through therapy and lots of prayer, along with an amazing husband, I was finally able to speak about it. It saddens me when women claim this and are lying for their own or someone else's gain. It's a devastating thing to go through, and even more devastating when people lie about it. And I, for one, find her story somewhat questionable, and that is sad too. So thank you, Sarah. Very, very sorry to hear that. I'm glad that you've got an awesome husband that's helped you through that. And
thanks for the vulnerability.
Yeah, we love you and great for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, not something to goof around about, man. This is such a serious thing. Yeah, great, Sarah. There's some people here that want to give you some love, Sarah. Take it, please. So the other thing that has so there's another element to this. I think it's worth mentioning. There's more than one woman who has said that Joe Biden has made them feel uncomfortable. We've seen some of the, sniffing the hair and what the hell is that all about? Weird crap that he does, right? What does that play on this for you? I got to tell you, for me, I got to tell you, it makes me kind of go, I don't know how far he went. This might be an exaggeration. Who knows? But there's enough women that say he's been creepy that I kind of get skeeved a little bit by him. I got to be honest. That's my take on it.
Well, I'm not that comfortable with men like him in general. I don't like that aggressive, braggadocious.
Don Draper from Mad Men 50s. I got a drink in my hand and slapping the girl in the ass. Yeah, I agree.
I'm not comfortable around. I don't want to be. It's not comfortable. I don't.
Do you remember when he got into that situation? I mean, Trump said one of the goofy things that Trump said, and they started talking about having like a push-up contest or something, or going about like fighting out.
How much do you think I can bench?
Yeah. I just remember thinking, who are these two people? What are you, 8 years old? Both of them, so that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Well, it's the old boys club.
Right.
That's what we're referring to, is like where that kind of, and he, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. This is one of the big problems for the Democratic Party in this situation, is that this is one of the things that young people, are pointing to. Like, can't we get somebody who's not of that age? Can't we get someone who's a little younger, a person of color, a woman? Can't we get somebody who has a little bit different perspective than the same people that have been running the country into the ground for the last 200 years?
Why would you want that, Eric? Can you explain that? I want to read a couple of these. Allison said she said, it saddens me that, as much as I hate to admit it, when it comes to elections, I expect allegations. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, point. Yeah. Why would you expect something? That's how
we do it these days. Yeah. Also, as a woman who's had trauma, I never know what to do. I have known wrongly accused men, and I know women who were not believed in their experience. Yeah. It's Allison. Thank you for saying that. This is such a tough topic for me. This, and another time we'll do a show on women's reproductive rights. That's also like those two topics. They're both so tough for me. But this one's particularly tough. Carol said, my understanding is that today Biden said it should be investigated. I was furious with Bill Clinton for referring to Monica as that woman. and I never forgave Hillary for condemning the victim. Yeah, agree. I can't say either would have made a bad president. In fact, either would have been so much better than the current person in the seat. Maybe sexual normalcy isn't a prerequisite for the office. Yeah, Kel, great point. Dave had made that point earlier, but I want to just say that I'm much more comfortable with finding out about someone's abnormal sexual proclivities once they've been elected. It's a little harder to go into the ballot box knowing that someone is. I just think that
this isn't kink. We're talking about assault.
Right. It's different.
That has, kink has no, I mean, it's not any, it doesn't have a role in this. This is what we're talking about is I don't mean to say he's guilty. What I'm saying is the topic is whether or not he assaulted someone. That's different than, whether or not somebody has, whatever kind of proclivity.
Yeah.
I can't say that word at the moment.
Yeah, I said it for you.
Thanks.
So Russ, glad you're here. Eric's comments on media bias. I think those were my comments, Russ, right? Did you say anything about that? He said, I've always been mystified by calls for objective journalism. Is there such a thing? None of us are immune from bias, and most of us scout and consume news that confirms our presuppositions. Yeah. Don't we as citizens and consumers have a responsibility to get out of our echo chambers and tune in at least occasionally to those outlets that challenge our worldview and our take on the truth? So, Russ, I think that you are absolutely right about that. And we must do those things. But I do think that there is a wide breadth, there's a spectrum between objective journalism, of which is rare, and pure propaganda, which I think most news has become.
Well,
most mainstream news.
And we agree on that point. I mean, there is no such thing as pure objective journalism, because you always have a bias, and you can't, even your unconscious bias, like it's going to be there. However, there are people who try really hard to make sure that they're being fair. And there are others, and I think it's the majority, who are trying really hard to sell a certain point of view.
Of course.
And certain news outlets are pretty out in the open about that. And I think that, I totally agree with almost everything Russ said. There are certain, I used to think, I really need to know what these, I don't need to know. I know that over and over and over again, I don't need to know. I don't feel like I need to know what CNN is saying. I don't feel like I need to know what Breitbart is saying. Fox, I don't. I've tuned in many times in the past, and all I see is propaganda, and I don't want it. And so there's, in the middle, there's plenty of sources that give you an idea of kind of the vibe, what's going on. And I try to look at international sources and also those things a little bit right and a little bit left of center, but I'm not interested in those extremes out there.
I agree with you. I consistently find Reuters and BBC to be the closest thing I find to journalism. I love their work. But Russ, here's what I want to say something. I think it's such an important point. Yes, we need to know what modern journalism has become. It's become a form of entertainment. It is a profit-driven model, and the idea of news now is not information. It is to keep you watching. We need to know that and take that with a grain of salt and tune most of it out, in my opinion. And if you want to get outside of that bubble, that echo chamber, watch Common Ground. Now, I'm mostly joking, but I'm not completely joking. That's what shows like this are about. This is a place where we can talk to each other directly. I do want to get out of my echo chamber with people, not with some media channel that's got an agenda. I want to talk to people about what's important to them when they don't see eye to eye with me. That's what the whole show's about. That's
and I say this all the time, and people that are tune in. I don't watch news television. Period. That's not an exaggeration. The last time I watched news was during the Thomas fires. Those of you that are a local fire here during the election. I look at some election results. That's it. I don't watch news on television. Yeah. I don't get any news from Facebook. I don't. I read articles and I listen to podcasts. It's interesting too, because there are podcasts that I listen to sometimes I have to go look up stuff that they refer to. That the most sophisticated, nuanced conversations that I
totally agree with you. I love
come from podcasts.
Love podcasts. Allison said, I also think sometimes, back to the discussion we had, I also think sometimes does a powerful political position invite or create opportunity for these behaviors or allegations? Some people are attracted to powerful men or women. Talked about that earlier, Allison. Absolutely.
So there's an attraction, as also the abuse of power.
Right.
Yes, to your questions.
Also, does it take an element of narcissism to want to be elected to such a powerful place? And if so, are they more likely this way or have these allegations? I guess it baffles me. Allison, I think you're absolutely right. If you watched the show last week, I talked about if we changed what was made available in politics, you'd get a different type of person coming to the trough to feed. There's so much power and perks in politics that it attracts these type of people. It does. It really does.
I just want to say I've had tons and tons of legislators, and for the most of them, they really are. I mean, the system is broken, but most legislators are trying really hard to do a good job, and they but at the highest level, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunity to be corrupt.
So one time, Grace Rodriguez. Hi, Grace. She said, actually, you can dramatically reduce bias if you have the ability to critically think. That was the point of a liberal arts education. It was to get people to think critically. Yes, but those are not really affordable for most people anymore, Grace. So let's move on. And then Dave, for your information, Biden didn't ask for an investigation. However, he called on the National Archives to release any personnel records related to a complaint that Rita said she filed in 1993 about the incident. And there are none of those records, if I'm not mistaken. They don't exist. That's a problem.
Well, I just want to say that, I'm not sure either way, but there was a very he did, and somebody was saying that this just came out today. So, maybe he did. Maybe this, as of, I mean, these things developed, may have statement, 4 hours ago. So.
Yeah. That's right. So, let's see if I got everybody. Pete said, it's truly an event that never leaves you. He's talking about sexual assault. Someone close to me was sexually assaulted at an even younger age and has been in counseling for over 4 decades. Can't begin to imagine how debilitating this can be to a person. I'm just hoping you found a way forward. I think he's replying to Sarah. Yeah. Once again, thank you for being so honest with all of us. Let's talk about a couple more things before our time runs out. I want to look at this story. I think this is very interesting. So,
about earlier about politics, that I was, the back to the question in the beginning, like, why can't we get a candidate? Well, I don't know the exact. I talked about a little bit, but the reason that both these parties are going to ride with these candidates is because of polling, because they desperately want to win so bad, and they've got dudes that are polling well, and so. That's the answer. They're so desperate, which makes you even sadder when you think about it. But the answer is the parties want so desperately to be in power that once they find, the Democrats looked, did they not? We're open for business. And then they got a bunch of people that came in. They looked at them. They gave them an opportunity to talk, to debate one day, and the polls were overwhelming. People voted overwhelmingly for Biden.
That's right.
Doesn't matter what you
fair and square.
He
didn't do a Hillary Clinton.
And the party has a good candidate. I mean, a good candidate in terms of
winnability, right?
And
that's probably all they're going to end up caring about. Stick around for my closing comments. That's what I'm going to touch on. Now you're out, right? So what about this? Now, this is a little touchy subject, but I thought this was an interesting perspective, and I want to share it with you guys. This was from
the assault allegation was not a touchy subject.
This is from a gentleman named Michael J. Stern. He is a member of USA Today's Board of Contributors. Okay, he said, I know that believe women is the mantra of the new decade. It is a response to a century of ignoring and excusing men's sexual assaults against women. But men and women alike should not be forced to blindly accept every allegation of sexual assault for fear of being labeled a misogynist or enabler. We can support the Me Too movement and not support allegations of sexual assault that do not ring true. If these two positions cannot coexist, the movement is no more a hit squad. That's not how I see the Me Too movement. It's too important for too many victims of sexual assault and their allies to be no more than that. So what do you guys think about that? And this is a person, I don't know what his position on this was, but on this particular case was, but he said that about it. I thought that was a very interesting perspective because I philosophically take this whole situation out of it. I philosophically agree with that. In order for any movement, for us to progress socially, the movement has to have some purity. It has to pass some purity tests. It can't just be like that, the Inquisition against these things. If it does pass that purity test, then it's going to attract the right people and grow and become part of our society. And come on, we're ready for this. We are ready to actually live up to the goal of equality for our women in every area of life, professionally, socially, in the home, everywhere. We're ready for this. That's what the progress. Anything that threatens that progress is unacceptable to me. I think it's so important. So I agree with that part of his statement. The Me Too movement is too important to allow it to be. We don't want it to get sloppy. It's got to be sharp. It can't. It has to be held to that standard because it's that important. I agree with that statement. What do you think about that?
I want to read it again, but I agree with that sentiment as well. Is that it is extraordinarily important, and it's extraordinarily important to remember the history that informs the the passion and anger behind. There is such a long history, and so many people have not been listened to. And
I mean, that whole thing with Harvey Weinstein, his behavior with all decades throughout, that's despicable. That was allowed to happen in our lifetime. I mean, that's incredible. That's like finding out that, well, I mean, you name it, these terrible things do go on in the world, but things that I would never.
That the Jell-O guy was a rapist? Like finding out like
Crosby,
that?
Yeah, that Bill Cosby, well, never mind. Yeah, no, it would be like finding out that Harvey Weinstein thing. I'm a Californian. Hollywood, very California. Hearing the extent to which that was happening to all those people. I grew up in the entertainment industry, and I know about some of the stuff, but to hear that was like me finding out that 20 miles from me, somebody was running like a slavery ring or something. Just like you don't imagine in this day and age that level of depravity would be possible in such a visible place, such a place that should have such transparency and visibility. That's what I thought about it.
Well, that, and that's the other piece of that, and that, that one of the things about being a movement started when there is a little bit of power and there's a little bit of safety, that and there's one of the things that I think about when you say the important it is, and in movements there are growing pains, and just like movements sometimes in their younger days have some growing pains, and maybe that's one of them. Maybe some of there's so much pent up anger that maybe that doesn't always get directed in the wisest way, and to be able to stick to it and to be able to hold some of that that anger and understand a little bit why there would be so much outrage. I think that's how we do it. We say, yeah, this outrage is justified, and like it's not going to always be clean, and maybe
the pendulum is a little farther away. You have a little tolerance for it. Yeah. I understand. Yeah. Got it. So we have so many awesome women that watch this show and have great things to say. I want to Grace, So this is going back to the point about schools, and I made a joke about them being too expensive for most people to attend. She said, that's my point. The oligarchs wanted to dumb us down so we can be controlled by making education only affordable to the children of oligarchs. You are absolutely right, John. Education isn't affordable for that reason. What do you think? Grace, I think that you're absolutely right.
Thank you, Grace.
There is no logical reason for schools to have increased in cost from 1,000 to 5,000%, depending on what school you're talking about, in my lifetime. There is no justifiable reason to shut that door to higher education to that many people, other than what you're saying.
Well, I don't understand what Pete talks about economics but I do believe that one of the things that happens when we print money for things like wars or even the bailouts that are occurring, the stimulus packages that are occurring now and in the past, one of the things that happens is inflation, and that goes up. So the cost of things goes up, but your wages don't go up, and that's what we've seen in our lifetimes, where just the cost of everything goes up and up and up and up and up, but our wages don't. We get a little tiny bump and that's part of that. Inflation is part of how we pay for it, and the part of that is also that the top isn't going to take a pay cut. They're not the ones in power. And the shareholders to all the major corporations, our government subsidizes that stuff. So those people never have to they never sacrifice. It's always us. And cynically, it's better if people aren't educated.
Yeah. For that system to maintain and sustain that system, it's better if people are poorly educated, frightened, and divided.
And we can't absolutely divide and frightened and the truth is, one of the reasons education, and one of the reasons why we have a post office, and one of the reasons why some of the social systems that we have is at some point we decided that it was very difficult, if not impossible, to have any kind of democratic society if people don't have some kind of education, they don't have some kind of ability to be communicated with through the post office. You've got to be able to have information has to be able to flow back and forth in order, now, it seems ridiculous in this time, this day and age, but that's, education and the exchange of information are necessary for democracy. And we're pricing out of the majority of the population out of really being educated,
or being able to afford a home, or being able to afford healthcare, or being able to afford a vehicle.
Agreed.
Without some debt.
Agreed. But that's not. Homes and cars and things aren't as crucial to democracy, to having a democratic society, as some education.
Okay, so I have the topic. I got some comments I want to get to. Carol made a great point. Believe is a dangerous word. We use it to replace think, know, determined, convinced, all the points in between. We cannot make decisions on belief, but upon evidence weighed without the biases attached to belief. Carol, what are you doing for the next 4 years? Because we've got this position we need filled. It's called president. Maybe you could thank you. Dave said, I guess it comes down to this. Which pervert do you want to point GB's replacement? Point taken, Dave. Which creep do you want to bring the economy back? Which degenerate do you want handling the COVID-19 crisis? Again, we must preserve the fundamental aspects of our jurisprudence. We do not assume guilty until proven innocent. We assume innocent until proven guilty. What I think we need to do is to constantly evolve in the courts until we treat the accused with deference and balance that with more indifference for victim. Pete, I think the place that all of us can sort of, the common ground for this conversation is that anytime there's an accusation, there should be the assumption of innocence until proven guilty, which is one of our foundational beliefs and our judicial beliefs, and then that there should be a fearless and thorough investigation of the crime. That's what we think, the alleged crime. Carol said
those are well-reasoned statements. I agree with both of those things, and that it's very difficult. I mean, one of the things that we find over and over and over again in all kinds of topics we've done on the show, people have a really hard time holding to different ideas in their mind, two opposing ideas or ideas that are far apart from one another. People have a hard time with this, and to be respectful to believe somebody, and Carol's got an amazing point to that idea. I think that she's right that I think the better way to say that, but again, the mantra is believe, but take the accusation seriously. Even believing in somebody, it may provide some emotional support that they need. However, taking the accusation seriously is even more important. So let's take the accusation seriously. Let's treat that person with respect and their accusation with respect, and let's reserve judgment, which is what what we're saying with presumed innocent. Reserve judgment until that investigation has been done.
It's so important that we accomplish this, because one of the huge challenges we have as a society is that over and over again these things happen, and women don't come forward because they're afraid of how they're going to be treated.
Yeah,
we've got to get rid of that. We've got to dispel that. Causes.
And look how Ford was treated.
Right. Oh yeah. And we'll never be able to get past the problem.
What happened? I mean, it's been a little while now, but it sure feels like very recently.
You said, Carol said, those of us in the age group of the candidates came of age in the Playboy Club era. Depravity was novel and cutting edge. Those who objected were labeled pure. It was hard for a woman to survive that culture. And I think some of these old dudes don't get how wrong they were. Cool. Carol, I like that. Awesome.
Carol, thank you so much for contributing.
Totally. Love it. And Carol also said, when I went to UCLA, tuition was about $200 per year. I paid $120 for the medical bills when Ben was born. That's her son. You guys, an interesting area. Yeah. Joe Nasser said, it's over for the Dems. I don't think they'll ever be able to take control for the next 100 years. Joe, hopefully nobody really has control. Hopefully we have a democratic republic where there are checks and balances, and it's governed in a way that is by and for the people. Control, I hope nobody has.
We'll see what happens in this, what this turns into. But the polls right now, the models are very favorable for a very tight race. So I'm not sure what that, I don't know that Joe. There's a couple Joes that listen. I don't know that Joe, but that's maybe that's just a hope of Joe's, but that's not what the polling shows at all. Is that Biden's doing quite well as of yesterday.
Grace said, this is where your male privilege is showing. We were afraid that it would, Grace. She said, you really don't appreciate that women who are assaulted by powerful men could not speak up because the backlash and lack of belief of the accusation would destroy the accuser. I think that's what we just said, didn't we? You really don't appreciate that women who are assaulted by powerful men could not speak up because the backlash and lack of belief of the accusation would destroy the accuser. She said, when my own mother would not believe. Yeah, I can appreciate that. I've seen that with people that I know. So Della, who's sitting right over there, told me a story yesterday about some things that happened to her when she was fairly young, and when she told her father, he didn't believe her. Yeah, I absolutely can appreciate that. Didn't come across in a way that misrepresented how I feel about that. I feels the same way, Grace.
Grace, point.
Yeah,
it's something that earlier show we talked about, and we talked about the privilege, and we can. Each of us has a perspective, and we need to, that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping for more dialogue.
Denise said, I'm really not being biased. Why is Trump's case still languishing in court? He has two cases that are still in court right now, Denise. And the reason is he has lawyers who can do that. That's the American legal system, right? You just tie it up in court for years and years and years. Pete said, Carol, do you believe that some of this was due to the sexual revolution and that we went through a period of objectifying mostly women, but then men as well, and that this is now more balanced in the generation?
What's more balanced?
I think Pete's trying to say, do you think that the millennials are sort of working this out, that objectification of women? She said, you are calling for investigations, and that is quite intimidating. Well, so great. Yeah. But before that, we're also saying that we as a society have to find a way to make these accusers know that they're going to be taken seriously and kept safe from some degree of there's got to be some type of respectful protections, because it is intimidating to come forward. And why? I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, if I felt like I was being sexually assaulted, I would not be afraid to come forward. I'm not afraid it's going to destroy my life. I'm not afraid people aren't going to believe me. But women have been afraid of this for as long as we can remember, right? So whatever that is, and this needs to be addressed by women. Women need to step forward and lead on this, and we have to follow them. We have to find a way to change that, and men aren't going to be able to come up with that solution. Women are going to have to lead us.
Well, which is where the believe women mantra comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one stage that I talked about earlier in the show, which was sometimes it's just about our own trauma and our own shame, admitting it to anybody that something happened, much less bring it to be willing to bring it into a public forum. Go tell somebody that you don't know. It can be hard enough to tell somebody that you do know. It could take years for you to get there because there's shame involved. Mm-hmm. And or there's so much trauma that your unconscious shuts it down, just says it's going to be compartmentalized. We're not going to deal with that. It's too much. And so once you get to a point where you are able to talk about it, then there's another hurdle. Like, oh, now I'm going to have to bring attention to this. Like, I'm going to have to, other people are going to look at this. And if it's a public figure, now, we all know Tara Reade's name, then that's going to happen. So that's an enormous burden. And if we don't, the other thing that we know, those people are going to not be believed. That's why, I know that what you read, some legitimate things to discuss there. However, that's why the mantra "Believe Women" is there, because look at what we have, and we have just seen, and we're going to see more of it. We're going to see people saying terrible things about her. I don't go on Facebook and look at things anymore, but I guarantee you there's already people that are saying terrible things about her.
Yeah, Denise says quite a few nasty comments directed to her already. We're not going to do that here. Grace made a good point. I'm sorry, because Carol said, Grace, the way to avoid public investigations is to not call the media first thing. Talk to a counselor who is required to report the abuse and walk you through the process. The investigations we did in the DA's office were not public. Please teach women to tell a trusted person. Thank you for saying that, Carol. Awesome.
Yeah, and by the way, we now have a new by the Carol's old employer. There's a started a program that I was on a planning committee for called the Family Justice Center, and there's a new outlet in our county, in Ventura County, for victims of sexual assault and sexual violence, to get a lot of different types of support. And awesome. It's a limited access at the moment during the pandemic, but it is a new program that's here in Ventura County.
Pete said, I think the millennials seem to understand better than older generations that people are people. They don't seem to be prejudiced about race, sex, class, etc. Pete, I find that too. My daughter's a millennial. I'm around a lot of people that age. They don't care. They don't care about your race. They don't care about your gender. They don't care if you're homosexual, straight, whatever. in class two, that's true. It's not as important a classification to them. I'm kind of an old school dude in a way, Carol. I mean, I have a daughter who's 20 years old. So you can probably guess what I think should happen to men who assault women. I don't think it should be. I think it should be ugly. I really do. If they're, but that I will admit, like I said at the beginning of this, I have a little bit of a bias against Biden because of the other women who said that he's made them uncomfortable. I think we'll find that some of this has a little bit of truth to it. Maybe it's not as extreme. Maybe it's just a little bit of
it comes from that
petting. And
Carol said it, in a more descriptive way than I did. But that's that attitude, that playboy attitude that I don't like. I don't like it, and he's got it. He's got that kind of that era, that swag from that era that you can. That I think that some certainly microaggressions are just part and parcel of that personality, if not very serious aggressions or assaults. But I mean, I don't.
How much you think I can bench? Hey. All right, guys. Thank you all for being here so much, and we're out of time. Going to get into the way I see it. This one was no fun for me to write, but I'm going to give you my honest opinion here, as I always do. The famous poet and artist William Blake said, "We become what we behold." You can say precisely how Mr. Blake intended for this to be interpreted by all of us who read and revere the greatness of his work, but I don't think he meant it in the way I'm going to use it tonight. As we approach the 2020 election, awash in partisan riot, political rage, and coronavirus cacophony, we must now add to the mix the ugly specter of sexual assault. For although the alleged Biden assault happened nearly 2 decades ago, mark my words, it will take center stage in this election. For many of us, that will be because we truly are on board with the newly hatched respect for women as true equals, socially and professionally, that awareness that has finally picked up real steam in the U.S. So basically just common decency and common sense. And then for some on the far left, it will be another way for them to find an appropriate vessel for that never-ending self-righteous outrage. For some on the far right, it'll be to point out the unfair treatment of Trump has received at the hands of his enemies for harmless locker room talk. Locker room talk? I've been in a lot of locker rooms, and I don't ever remember any men bragging about grabbing women's genitals. But what else really can those folks say, having utterly and totally cast their lot in with a man whose sexually vulgar behavior around women has inspired more than 20 sexual assault complaints? There'll be another group, the one that will make most noise. And now I know where I sit. I'm in number one. In fact, I actually don't even believe equality between men and women. In my experience, a woman is a far finer, more intelligent, and subtly nuanced creature. As I've said on this show more than once, I firmly believe that female leadership is the only thing that will be able to save humanity. It's that serious, in my opinion. I'll explain. A man is a simple creature, particularly the ones among us who crave political power. Therefore, the complexity of human emotion is all too often lost on such men. Rather than decipher the stew of their own emotional behavior, those men would just as soon fight it out and blow shit up. But to be led by nurturers who seek to resolve issues through communication and intuition, and to see an end to monster truck rallies and pro wrestling, bring on the age of women, I say. So now that I've shown you all how 21st century woke I am, let me get to that last group I was talking about. This will be the group of hard-right pundits who scream loudest, and they will say, you Democrats are hypocrites. You pretend to be all #MeToo until it's one of your own in the hot seat. And they will be on to something. They aren't wrong. We discussed the lack of news coverage of this story from the mainstream media, and there are few Democrats complaining about that lack of coverage. Democrats are not so much defensive of Biden's wrongdoings as they are shell-shocked with dread and confusion. This is really very nearly a worst-case scenario. They don't know what the hell to do. But I'll tell you what they will do. Because mark my words again, Democrats are about to become what they beheld, and not in the poetic, inspiring William Blake sort of way. Here's my prediction. Democrats and people like myself, I admit it, will have to face that Biden is probably, at least to some little extent, guilty. And we will be repulsed by this. We will decry his behavior. But ultimately, we'll accept it and vote for him. I know. But it's just too important an election. No matter how much we hate what Biden is and what he's done, to us, the other guy is worse. We need him out. And we will lower our standards to get the job done. Just like many Republicans who voted for Trump. It's like what Dave said. Which pervert do you want replacing RBG? I'm not talking about dudes draped in Confederate flags and MAGA banana hats, or women wearing red, white, and blue shirts with slow Trump that bitch, completely unaware of the irony. I'm talking about normal, decent Republicans who just felt that something had to change no matter what the cost. So they elected a reality TV show fake tough guy, hoping he could take on Washington. Well, hi, and my Democrat friends, you're about to try to elect a guy who probably has done some pretty creepy shit to women. And so am I. I'm right there with you because something has to change no matter what. We are about to become what we beheld in the people we have just loved to judge. I know I have, I admit it. But as a person who is firmly in the anyone but Trump camp, me, well, today that moral high ground seems a long way up from where I stand. There will be many who disagree with me and some won't vote at all. I won't attack you for standing by your convictions, but I would ask you to remember that that's the demographic that elected Trump, those who sat it out. Others will take a different approach. They will vote for Biden's plausible doubt in Tara Reade's story, which there is. And they will placate themselves with that narrative, and they will be affirmed by a media that is hesitant to get their hands dirty on this one. Those folks will be able to assuage any rumblings of guilt they may feel by retreating into the intellectual bomb shelter of, I'm on the side of what's right. And I will envy them because I will be unable to follow them in there. And the blast is going to hit me full in the face. But I can't take refuge in that place because you know who else is going to be down there in that bomb shelter? All those folks who've convinced themselves that the pussy-grabbing egomaniac in chief was chosen by God to lead America. Lead us where? Into massive plague? And all the other people who justify the terrible words and deeds of Trump because they've convinced themselves that he is on the right side. Yeah, no thanks. I think I'd rather face the bomb blast and just take this in. I'm not trying to do what's right. I'm trying to do what's best. And sadly, they are not always the same thing, especially in a faulty political system that only gives us two viable choices. So I'll vote for Joe. The existential threat that is Donald Trump will compel me to. Yes, I mean that. Existential threat in my eyes. Yes. From normalizing childishness and pettiness to white supremacists, from defiling our legal processes with his appointed cronies to degrading our language with his inability to use it, for bragging about being able to shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose support and being absolutely right about that, for feeding the soul sickness lurking in America's guts. This man who represents a figurative spear to the heart of everything I love about our culture, while simultaneously personifying everything about him I despise, greed, dishonesty, America first, which is translated mostly to me and my wealthy friends first, and all the rest you can have the scraps. He must go. So, as I have done almost every time I voted in a general election in my adult life, I will, as I said in the opening, turn my head, hold my nose, and cast my ballot for the only alternative our political process offers me. Now, is there a bright side to all of this? Of course, there always is. Here's one. This is an opportunity for us to see that we're not that different. We are exactly the same in many ways. We will sacrifice a lot to see what we love endure. So maybe there's a door in the space between left and right that is cracked open and let just a little bit of light through. Maybe that light will see that we're brothers and sisters, not adversaries. And that maybe, if we put some time and energy in trying to understand what the people who don't think like we do love and cherish, we could begin to understand them. That doesn't mean we have to love the same things. That doesn't even mean we have to agree. We shouldn't agree all the time. We often won't. It means that we tolerate that which may not make sense to us because we are members of the same family. Maybe we will learn that we can speak out when something's wrong without trying so hard to make one wrong because they don't think like us. Because now we all know. Sometimes in some election to come, you might be wrong too. Maybe we'll look at this two-party system and say, hey, we should change this so that our citizens aren't stuck with two horrible choices throughout most of the election year. Maybe we can look at some ideological variety in our politics and let that reflect in our elections. And this last one isn't a bright side. It's a beg from me to liberals and Democrats. Please, I know you're going to vote for Joe Biden, so am I, but don't lie for Joe Biden. Don't excuse him if the facts show him to be wrong. If indeed you learn unquestionably that Joe is guilty, don't rationalize it. Don't perpetuate a bunch of boys will be boys crap to absolve him. Walk your eyes wide open and be honest about what we are doing. Send Joe a message. If in fact he is guilty, and we don't know that he is, but if he is, we don't know that we are voting for him because we live in a system that has left us no other choice. We're voting for him even though we find his behavior appalling. Make sure the world knows it is a change in policy we are looking for, not a flawed man. We're making concessions, not excuses. Don't sell your souls. Please maintain some standard of decency. And then, if Joe gets elected, we can make damn sure that we hold him to those same standards. Thanks, guys. That's our show. Have a great night. We will see you next week. Love you all. Thank you so much for participating. This was a great one. All our lovely ladies out there, just thank you so much for sharing your lovely souls with us. That was awesome. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe.